Hey guys, it's Mr. Green here, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about myself, which is like my favorite subject, so. So this is different for me because a lot of my videos are more sort of like practical hands-on videos, but I figured I would talk a little bit about myself to give you guys an idea of what I do. I do feel it's really important in this space to be able to qualify yourself when you're out there as a spiritual teacher, right? I do want you to understand where I get my background from and what I can actually do, because I don't want it to appear that I'm on the internet like a fraud. Not saying that I think I'm appearing like a fraud, but I watch YouTube videos, okay? I think it's important for me to qualify myself, okay? So my journey with spirit is a lifelong journey, right? It's been happening since I was in childhood. I just didn't know that that was what was going on. As a kid, around the age of 8 or so, I used to astral project all the time because I would get bored. I would lay in bed sometimes at night. Maybe I couldn't sleep, and instead of just laying there restless, I would like leave my body and float around the house, right? Because I had nothing else to do. I just didn't know at that age that that was what I was doing, but it was a very natural experience. And then I went on throughout life. It kind of died down a little bit, even though I was always a little bit whimsical. Like I was always really attracted to rocks, always was really attracted to like crystals. I remember I went on a field trip to like this science museum when I must have been like 9, and I spent all of my money on tumblestones, and I didn't even eat lunch because I wanted to buy tumblestones. And I was so excited about these tumblestones, and I went home to show my mother these tumblestones, and she was mad at me that I had all these tumblestones and wanted me to throw them away. And I remember at 9 having this intuitive knowing that I had to hide them. And but I was ridiculed for having them. And, you know, anyone that like understands Black families, it was like, look at here she go again with her rocks. And I felt so bad because I was made to feel that it was something so bad. And so I remember at a little girl throwing out my tumblestones because I felt bad that I had liked them. And when I was 13 years old, I saw my first and only ghost, right? Because, and I say only on purpose, because after that, I was like, hell no, F this. Like, these are not the games that we're playing in this lifetime. And it was a cat, actually. I was at my best friend's house and her parents weren't home. She was in one room playing on the computer. I was in a different room playing on PlayStation, the first one, and Mario Kart, I think. And I heard this bell, and I was sitting on the phone, but I heard this bell ring. Prior to that, maybe about 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks prior, the cat had died. And they were like, okay, because it was like this old cat. The cat was called Blue. And, but I heard this bell and I looked to my right, and sure enough, there was this cat walking down the hallway, and it looked like the cat itself, but you could see through it. And I was like, holy shit. So then I remember going, like, I remember calling out to my friend, like, yo, like, get in here right now. And she just was preoccupied. And then when she finally did, I was like, let's go. We're going to my house. I just saw your dead cat. We're not doing this. And then she thought I was crazy. So I hightailed it out of there. I left her there because I was like, if you want to be left for dead, that's your business. I'm not staying in this goddamn haunted house. And then I went home. And then like 2 or 3 days later, she called me crying because she was home by herself. And sure enough, she saw that damn cat. And that was the last ghost I ever saw, because I was like, spirit, I ain't playing with you. And then that was the end of that. Then the whole thing shut down because I was terrified beyond belief, right? So everything shut down. I saw, felt, heard nothing until I was, I want to say 20 years old. But when I turned 18, it started to creep back in. I remember standing in the lines at a Barnes and Noble, and I saw a tarot deck that was in that impulse buy section for like $5, and I bought it. And I knew nothing about tarot prior to that. I wasn't interested in tarot, but I had bought it, and then that's kind of where it started. When I turned 20 years old, a lot of sort of traumatic things happened in my life. A lot of people in my family died really suddenly back to back, and I'm talking like within months of each other. And this one particular family member that died, that same day that she died was the same day that I saw her, but she wasn't like on this plane. And it was a really trippy experience because she died, somebody took her life, and everything was in a state of pandemonium. And I hear someone talking to me, yelling at me, like my name, like hello. It was very much like what you would see in a movie. Like, hello, I'm here. Like, hello, like, hello, like, hello. Like, it really felt like somebody was on like a different plane, like trying to get my attention. Like, hello, dude, I'm right here. I'm right here. Right. And then but I was so like struck with grief that I'm like, you're losing it. This is when they lock you up. Like, this is when you go into a hospital. But the energy, and she was so persistent that eventually I was like, okay, hello. And then she was like, oh, thank God. She was like, look, I don't know what the fuck just happened. I'm laughing because I'm really glad that I'm in a place in my life right now that I've done enough healing where I can actually speak about this story, because I've gone through a lot. And I guess I could just tell you guys, this person that I'm talking about is my sister. She was murdered. And that is when everything kicked in and everything came in full force. All of my abilities sparked. Because she literally was on the other side, like, holy shit. That was crazy. And I'm saying it this way because that was how she said it to me, right? Like, the way she was communicating with me, she was like, I don't know what happened, but oh my God. But then she was like, I need you to do these things for me. And so as my family is freaking out, grieving, as we're dealing with detectives, as we're fussing, trying to get into the morgue, she's with me, giving me instructions on what to do, where to go, who to tell, what to go find my belongings. I put it over here. Go tell this person they're over here. And then she would give me marching orders, and then she would go. Like, so she would be, because the family was broken up and we were separated in different states. And so she would say, you handle this, like, I'll be back. I have to go see about mommy. And then she would leave. And then, so I would be there, like trying to help her with her final affairs, thinking I'm crazy, not knowing what's going on. I'm trying to tell people, like, yo, this girl is in this room, but they're so struck with grief, they can't. And that was how it all kicked in all at one time. And then I had more people in my family pass away within a few months of that. And it just was this really traumatic, grief-stricken period of my life where I saw nothing but darkness in spirits. And the worst thing to be is grieving, traumatized, dealing with all the mental health disorders that come with that, because I was diagnosed with a lot of the things, including PTSD at that time. And also thinking that you're seeing things in your apartment, right? And then going to doctors, and then they're just trying to say that you're crazy, or trying to misdiagnose you when you know that, like, that's not the thing. And so my sister actually spent a lot of time talking to me, communicating with me, helping me. And she was the one that kind of pushed me into this. And then so one day I was just kind of at a really low place in my life. And I went to see a psychic, and it was the first psychic that I had actually went to go see. And this is when I lived in London. And this is back when I thought psychics were evil. Oh yes, there was a day she thought that psychics were evil. If you'd have told me at that time that I would become the very thing that I was afraid of, I would have said you was lying, but I digress. And I used to think that, like, if you would go see a psychic, that they would put roots on you, and then you would leave, and then you would have things and entities follow you home. And I just didn't understand how any of it worked. And that's a lot of the reason why I focus so hard on making this information easy and accessible for you guys, because I understand what that feels like. And so I was like, hey, by the way, I think I'm seeing things. And so she was like so nonchalant and blasé. She was like, oh, honey, like, you're just a little mediumistic. Like, and I just couldn't understand, like, how she could say it like that. And I remember going, like, well, what does that mean? And she was like, well, it just means that you can talk to spirits. And I was like dead people? And she was like, well, yeah, I mean, if that's what you want to call it. And I was like, oh, hell no. I was like, screw this. What we are not going to do is talk to dead people. And she was just kind of sitting there like, well, you know, this is what you are. Like, you know, I don't know if you don't really think you have a choice. And so she was like, honey, she was like, there are some people that get a knock on the door and they can ignore that knock on the door. Right. And then no one ever knocks again. But then there are some people who get a knock on the door and the knock will get louder and louder and louder and louder and louder and louder until you answer it. And they don't have a choice whether or not they answer that door. Either you answer it or spirit will bust it down. But it's up to you to decide how you want that to look, which of course terrified the shit out of me. And then so I was like, okay, well, what would I do? And so she was like, I suggest you go to the London College of Psychic Studies. I was like, pause, you're telling me that there's a place that people go to learn this stuff? She was like, yes. And I was like, oh no, I am not going into a place with a bunch of crazy people. And I remember, like, at this time, I was actually that ignorant, and that was how I viewed it, right? Which is why I have a lot of understanding for people that are really skeptical about this world, because I used to be one. And but then she was like, okay, and then that was the end of it. And then 2 years went by, and then I lost my job. I used to have this really swanky job at one of the top law firms in the United Kingdom, and I beat out 4,500 applicants to get that job, kicked ass, beat out all those Oxford, Cambridge, white male graduates, right, whose like uncles are like Supreme Court Lord Justices and this, you know, whatever, and got the job, lost the job, but needed a job, and then had to go work minimum wage in a sweet shop or a candy store for my American counterparts. And the sweet shop was located at a place called Camden Market in London. And in that market, if there's any of you that watch this video that's familiar with that place, there are no public restrooms. Well, in London in general, is really not a lot of public restrooms, but in the market, there's definitely isn't. So if you work like a market stall, you have to shut it down and then go to a public restroom to use the bathroom and then come back and reopen. And so I was working that day. I was the only person. I was like super depressed, and I was like, I had to wear a hairnet, and I was selling candy bars, and I was getting yelled at by people over Twinkies. And I was like, look at, here I am. I've got like 5 degrees, and this is what I got to do. And I shut it down and go to a public restroom. And I'm walking down the street, and I kid you not, there is this box there that everyone was walking around. It was a really busy day, and it was a box in the middle of the sidewalk. Nobody was looking at it, and everyone was walking around it. And so as I'm going, I'm like, well, what is this box? And I look in this box, and there are brochures in this box for, are you ready for this? London College of Psychic Studies. And I was like, shut the front door. We are not doing this today. But long story short, obviously I was curious. I picked up one of those brochures. They were having a seminar that night that was open to the public, and the seminar was channeling archangels. And I went, and I remember being terrified. I was like, here we go. I'm walking into the building full of spirits. I'm taking spirits home with me. I just cannot believe I'm doing this. And I walked in there terrified, absolutely terrified. And it was like a whole process. I remember like sitting there waiting for the class to start, and then but really having to go to the restroom, and then like, so asking the receptionist, hey, where's your bathroom? And so she was like, oh, it's in the basement. And I was like, you would. I was like, you guys would put a freaking bathroom in the basement of a building that's haunted. How dare you, right? But I had to go so bad. I waited until I saw a woman like walk down there to go to the bathroom, and then I ran behind her, because in my head, I was like, we'll just go at the same time, so someone's always in there and I can go. So anyway, so I'm going to the bathroom, and I hear the door shut, and then it turns out the woman just finished her business, and then she left, and so I was the only one in there. And so I had like this moment of like severe panic, and I was like, oh shit. And then so I like tried to hurry up and get out of the bathroom, open the store, bust through. I see something. I kid you not. I saw something, freaked out, screamed, ran into a wall, and you know what I saw? My damn reflection in the window. And it was in that moment, or in the mirror, and it was in that moment where I learned that so much of what you fear is yourself, right? It was this really weird, all of a sudden, like spiritual alignment of understanding that happened that day. I did the seminar, I sat in the back, and when I was in there, I noticed that there was people from all walks of life, all colors, a healthy mix of different genders, people of all different kinds of occupations. When you think of a psychic, they show you like these witchy looking women that are wispy with like willowy hair and long flowing skirts. They don't show you normal people that look like me. That's why I try so hard to just be my true authentic self with you guys, because it looks like a lot of different things. And that was the first place where I felt like I truly belonged. Everybody accepted me. It was the first school that I have ever been to, and I have been to a lot of universities that took me in, and I felt immediately accepted right away. And the first night in the first seminar, I watched somebody get channeled. I watched faces change. I watched voices change. Energies of the room change, and I was in awe, terrified, but in awe at the same time. And then I formally trained there for a while. I formally trained in tarot. I formally trained in mediumship, psychic development, spirit guides, oral readings, all of that type of stuff. Also did past life regression when I was there as well. So I'm actually a formally trained psychic medium. They took what I had and they helped me use it. Some, like, you take classes there, you pay fees, you pay class fees. Some classes have exams and tests and everything like that. So that's kind of like a really quick story into like how I got here, right? And so what do I do now? Like, how do my abilities manifest themselves? So I am a clairvoyant. I do see very well. Like, I am psychic. I can predict certain events. Thinking about it now as an adult, I used to do it as a kid. I just didn't know that. My old people used to just say, oh, she has an old soul, or, oh, she's so wise for her age. But I understand now that it wasn't necessarily just wisdom. It was just like, I could see that if you do that, I could see 10 steps ahead. And as a kid, I thought everybody could do that. I thought everybody could see like years down the line. I hadn't realized that that wasn't the case. I remember talking to somebody, one of my friends, a few years ago, and I was like, well, you know how things happen, how you can see like 10 steps. And they were like, what? And I was like, you don't see 10 steps? And they were like, no. And it was when I realized at that moment that people don't see that far out. I can see the course of events, and I can see multiple courses of events. I can see possibilities. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. I can see possibilities and I can see consequences. I can see future actions and consequences of those future actions. And not only can I see immediate consequences, I can see consequences that can play out 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now. And so when I read for people, that's a lot of how my reading goes. I will tell you what's going to happen. And then I also let you know you can pick your possibility, but all of these possibilities will happen depending on what you do, right? But at the same time, I also know which possibility you'll pick, which is really interesting. I just thought that everybody saw the world like that, but they don't. I also hear. I'm clairaudient. I have a very clear hearing. The way I communicate with spirit is like how I'm talking to you right now. I can hear them talking to me. I hear tone, accents, music. I can hear music if they want to play me something. But spirit talks to me like an actual conversation, and I talk to them like that. So if I'm by myself and I pick up on spirit talking to me, I will sometimes talk out loud, like how I'm talking to you, and it's a back and forth conversation about something. I also can smell sometimes. This kicks in with like mediumship. Like, let's say you used to have a really loving grandmother who used to always like make you your favorite soup or something. Sometimes what'll happen is that they'll let me taste it. They'll let me taste what soup they made for you. And so what happens is then I can describe it back. So I can be like, I can taste that this person always used chicken stock, but they were a little heavy-handed on the salt because it tastes really salty. And I can feel I feel all of the sensations on my tongue. And then a lot of other clear. I don't have a smell thing. Some people can smell. I don't have a smell thing. A clear knowing. I have a clear knowing, right? But I've always associated my clear knowing with, I don't know. It's, for me, it always felt objective. It was just always that 10 step ahead thing. I understand now that maybe people would call it clear knowing, but like whatever. And then, but it manifests itself more so in a clairvoyant sense, in a sense that I see. So the way I see is, it's like a movie reel that flashes, or or like Polaroid will flash. So I'll get an image in my head that I can see in my third eye. And the image can have anything in it. It can have colors and people. It could be a scene that plays out. It can have anything. On top of that, I'm also a channel. I do talk to higher dimensional beings, emphasis on the higher. I play for the light team, honey. I don't play for the dark team. I play for the light. So this can be angelic beings, but it can also just be multidimensional beings. On Earth, we call them aliens, right? But to me, they're just multidimensional, interdimensional beings. They're not always angelic beings, but they do come from higher realms, and they are just as wise, and they have their own very particular specific purpose. Some of these beings usually aren't ever from this particular galaxy or this particular realm. So extra dimensional beings, if you want to call it that way. So that's another thing that I do as well. And then, so when I'm doing a reading for somebody, all of those things come into play. None of those things come into play. I mean, it just depends, but that's kind of what's happening in my woo-woo-ness of auras. So I always think it's really funny when people come down for a reading and they're like, and I'm like, well, why are you here? And they're like, I don't know, just here to see what you do. Just, flip some cards. And I'm like, okay, you can sit here and test me if you want to. You're going to lose. But like, also, I don't need the cards to tell you that that guy that you really wanted to talk about that left 7 months ago is actually not going to come back. And like, that's just kind of the end of that. And that job that you really hate, you should probably leave it. And don't worry, because you have money coming to you in the form of a really surprise check in about 3 or so weeks. Just make sure you check your mailbox. Oh, by the way, go back to USPS and re-register your address because they think that you don't live there anymore. And if you don't go do that, then it's going to take you longer to get that check. Right? Like I can do all of that because I have the ability to see that many steps out. And so that's just me. That's what I do. So all of these things make me a really kick-ass magician. I am a manifester, but it makes sense. If you were to ever look at my birth chart, it makes sense. I'm a 1 life path number. I'm a Gemini, but I'm a rising Aries. So, I mean, where I decided to incarnate, right, just makes all of those energies kind of match up. And so that is why I talk to you about the things that I talk to you about, some of the things that I address in the podcast. That's why some of that is the way it is. That's why I do a lot of magic videos, because part of learning something that's so overwhelming is having the ability to touch it yourself. And the problem is when you're looking for information, so much information is so theoretical that you can't see it with your eyes in practice, which is why I put like heavier emphasis on like magic, because it's practical teaching, and also I'm just really good at it. So but yes, that's a little bit about me and sort of like my little magical prowess and gifts, and hopefully that helped you sort of understand like more so of me and maybe why I teach the way I do. And my hope is also that it adds a level of like authenticity and transparency when it comes to who you're listening to on the internet. So, yeah, but that's it. So as always, guys, if you like what you see, please subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you guys soon.